All right, I think we'll get started, and then folks can keep joining as we go along. Welcome everyone. This is the latest installment of the Power of Descope Flows, and today we're going to be focusing on how you can add passkeys to existing logins or authentication services. So let's just dive right into it. First, a little background about me. So my name's Kevin. I work as Descope as an engineer. For hobbies that I like to do, I love driving and working on cars, love to travel, and on weekends I tutor and volunteer to help teach kids math. Um, so for the agenda today, we're going to break this down into three different sections. So first, I'm going to just do a quick intro for those of you who aren't familiar with Descope at all on what our product actually is, certain features that we offer. Then I'm actually going to dive into the basics and fundamentals of Passkeys and OpenID Connect. These are kind of the two main technologies or standards that we're going to be discussing in this particular webinar. And then after that, after the basics of Passkeys and OpenID Connect, we're going to actually create a Passkeys authentication flow using Descope Flows. We're going to just go right from scratch and sign up for the console and everything. Then we're going to add Passkeys to an existing AWS Cognito user pool. So for those of you that are already using Cognito and maybe are considering Descope as a viable alternative for authentication, this will give you some insight into how you can actually leverage Descope as your authentication service without completely ditching or disregarding AWS Cognito. So this is great. This is great for people who maybe have API gateways or app sync schemas already set up to use AWS Cognito and are a little bit wary of moving off of Cognito, but still want to have a lot more kind of robust authentication login or a more robust authentication login experience than something like the hosted UI can offer. So we're going to dive into that, and I'm going to show you how you actually configure Descope to work with Cognito as a federated identity provider. And then finally, we're also going to touch on how you actually merge user IDs from Descope with the ones that already exist in Cognito using a pre-sign-up Lambda trigger. So a lot of great information in this. Again, really beneficial to people who already have Cognito and are considering Descope. But it's important to note that this is really kind of beneficial to anybody who has any other authentication service like a Firebase or Auth0 or something, because the same standards of OpenID Connect can be used across all those platforms. So let's dive into it. So first, just a quick intro for those of you who are new to Descope. I'm just going to answer, what is Descope? We are a complete authentication and authorization service. So we offer authentication methods, pretty much everything you'd ever want, from Passkeys to Google OAuth social login, magic link, OTP with SMS or email, and of course, passwords. But we also offer, SAML and OIDC SSO, and we are FIDO2 compliant. In regards to user management, we offer multi-tenancy. We have a very simplistic way of managing, tenants in a B2B setting. We support RBAC, but also REBAC and ABAC as authorization controls, and SCIM provisioning as well. And really what kind of differentiates Descope in the market from other authentication services is our concept of a no-code workflow. And so it allows you to completely customize how your authentication works, what auth methods you want to support, all the login screens and progressive profiling screens you may want to build, and allows you to do all that in a no-code workflow that's embedded in your app. In this particular webinar, we're actually going to take it a step further and show you how you don't even need to actually embed this workflow in your own app. You can actually use Descope with other authentication services like Cognito and have Descope host and manage that workflow for you. And so then finally, a key kind of aspect of Descope we offer, which kind of ties into the workflows, is our connectors ecosystem. So we have a full range of third-party services, anywhere from HTTP webhooks all the way to Datadog for auditing, HubSpot and Segment for marketing purposes. And we allow you to integrate these third-party services into your flow, embed them with drag and drop very easily, and allow you to collect or receive information and assign it accordingly to your users. So going forward, we need to, I want to quickly go over what Passkeys are and what OpenID Connect is, because these two are very important things you'll need to understand for the rest of the demo. And so passkeys, really, when it comes down to it, passkeys are just another authentication method. So they allow your users to log into your apps in the same way you would with, say, a password, but using a biometric or some kind of physical characteristic of your person. So something like a fingerprint, a face scan. We even offer, if you want to use a physical device, if you want to use like a WebAuthn enabled YubiKey or something like that, you can do that with passkeys. The benefit of this is really twofold. So the first kind of key thing that everybody talks about and loves with passkeys is the user experience. So from a user experience standpoint, passkeys are incredibly powerful because they don't require users to sign in with a password. They don't require users to remember a password. It's incredibly easy to actually log in. All you do is, we'll actually demo this later on in the webinar. But you can simply just save the passkey actually in your browser. There's a strong and very kind of broad ecosystem support for this. Pretty much every major operating system now supports passkeys. Almost every single browser from Chrome, Firefox, et cetera, also kind of natively supports passkeys. And so you can, really just like with a touch of a button, pretty much just log into any app that you have. And so it's a really powerful thing from an app developer standpoint to be able to give to your customers, because this tends to lead to lower drop-off rates. It tends to lead to just a general increased appreciation for your app across your customer base. But then the other kind of key benefactor to passkeys that is not talked about maybe as much is the security aspect of it. And so, especially compared to something like passwords, passkeys are much more secure. And the fundamental reason is because despite what many people might misunderstand, is that the biometric register or the digital credential that contains such things like your fingerprint or your facial recognition information, things like that, those are signed with a private key that never leave your device. And so it relies on this protocol of WebAuthn, where a public key is kind of exposed to the public, and your client or your application fetches that public key. That public key you can't really do anything with that public key, so it's exposed to the world, but you can't do anything unless it's used in tandem with your private key, which never leaves the device. And so if you had, let's say, a server that was intruded and passwords were kind of stolen from a password manager or something like that, you wouldn't have to worry, because the passkeys themselves, or the actual fingerprint or information, biometric information that identifies you as you, is never actually stored on someone else's device. It's always stored on your device. And so, not only do you not have to worry about a breach on a password manager or another kind of app server, you also don't have to worry about the password or a password ever getting kind of guessed and intruded that way, because it's just a encrypted credential that's stored on your personal device, not something like a password that might be easily guessable, or something that could be reused across many apps. And if one gets broken and stolen, they potentially have access to other ones. So there's a lot of those are the key kind of beneficial aspects to passkeys, and it's one of the auth methods that we're going to focus on today. Now, when it comes to OpenID Connect, this is essentially the way in which something like Descope can work in tandem with something like Cognito or Firebase or whatever other authentication services you might already have. And so this is a well-regarded standard of federated authentication. In other words, it's a well-regarded way of connecting a Descope as an OIDC provider with Cognito, and allowing Cognito to trust that Descope has authenticated the user properly, and then essentially sign that user in with Cognito without Cognito actually having to verify the user themselves. And so This kind of works based in the diagram you see here. This works in such a way where the user actually signs in with something like Cognito, but instead of Cognito actually using, you say using like the hosted UI, instead of using Cognito's own form of authentication, you actually get redirected to Descope. And Descope is already configured incognito as an identity provider, a federated identity provider. And then that user logs in, verifies their email, does all that stuff with Descope. And then when it comes back to the identity provider looks at the token from Descope, says, okay, this is a valid token, everything's good, and then logs the user in as if they'd logged in with Cognito. And so the real kind of breakthrough here is you have the ability to use another provider, say Descope, as your authentication service without having to change any of your backend infrastructure that you already have with Cognito. And so if you have API gateways already set up, configured with your Cognito tokens, if you have your app sync schemas that rely on your Cognito user groups, all that stuff, that is all completely the same because your users are actually stored in both Descope and the Cognito user pool as they already are. All the information that is collected from Descope is merged and migrated with your Cognito users. And when you sign in, all the tokens and everything that are generated on your front end are Cognito tokens. So there's no real kind of hint of Descope at all, really, in from the user's perspective. It's as if you were logging in with Cognito. So this is the real kind of benefit, beneficial aspect of OIDC. And so hopefully that kind of explained a little bit about, or hopefully you understand a little bit more about what OIDC actually does and the power of it. What I want to do now is I actually want to run through the getting started wizard real quick, show you guys how easy it is to set up a flow. Then we're going to look at a flow that I've already built. I'm going to explain a few things about it. We're going to go into a Cognito user pool. I'm actually going to show you how you set that all up with Descope. And then I have a next sample app, which is using the Amplify v6 SDK, which is the latest version of the Amplify SDK. And that's going to kind of show you end-to-end how this all works. So let's go into it. All right. So the first thing we want to do is let's just go to descope.com/signup. Hopefully you guys can see. This is, if you wanted to get started with Descope, this is kind of your first point of entry here. And so all you'd have to do to sign up is just provide your email. I'm going to just provide something like Kevin plus 25 because I already have an account, just to show you what that looks like. All right, then we get the password 932. Awesome. So I'm a completely new user, so it's going to ask me for my name. Put that in. Great. So now I'm in. I have a new Descope account, and I've automatically signed in and been taken to the console. So this is the meat of the product. This is where everything you do with Descope is handled, from your flows to what auth methods you use to all your user information, etc. So the two things that we're going to focus on today is we're going to focus on flows, and we're also going to focus on IDP apps. So the first thing we want to do is actually create a flow. And your flow, remember, is just simply your user journey. It's your user, it's all the user experience stuff, the conditionals, everything, all the screens that you want to build for how a user actually signs in. So first thing we can do is we can just answer this very simple question: who uses your app, businesses or consumers? I'm just going to say consumers. We don't really need any B2B tenancy or anything like that. We'll go to consumers, and then you can see it says B2C because we selected consumers. And then for which authentication methods you want to use, the purpose of this webinar is to demonstrate being able to use Passkeys, which is something that isn't natively supported by Cognito. So let's add that. Let's have Passkeys as one of the primary auth methods. We can also add something like Magic Link. It's just a demonstration. So you can select these two, then click next. And then for which method you want to use for MFA, MFA is multi-factor. If you want to, if you want to have a secondary layer of security. In this case, we don't really need it for the demo purposes. So I'm just going to say go ahead with that MFA, but you could select any one of these if you wanted to. And then the meat of the actual product or the meat of the flows is here. So this is what these are the flows that are actually going to be generated when I click this next button. This is what the flow screen is going to look like. So based on my previous selections, you can see it has an email field where I can sign in with an email. It'll send a magic link to my email that I can verify, and that's how I can sign in, or I can continue with biometrics. And then the flow that we're going to use is something akin to the sign up or in flow. So you can create as many flows as you want. And I'll show you what the flow editor looks like and everything, but these are the ones that are going to be created. And this is the one that we're going to focus on today. So if I click on next, you can see it says generating. So the flows are generated. So now if I click on run code, this is the flow that I just generated. It's actually running embedded in the app in this console here. And typically, if you were building your application and you had something like a React application, this component here would actually render this flow. And this is not just that one screen; it's the entire flow that you've created. And what's great about this is actually, because it's tied to your specific project and flow ID, any changes that you make in the console automatically reflect in the app. And this holds true, by the way, for what we're going to do today, which is use our auth hosted page. The difference is that again, with Cognito, ideally our app has no relation to Descope at all, because it's as if we're logging in and logging out with Cognito. And so this is not really relevant for this particular webinar, but this is how you would embed it in your own app. And then if we go to flows, I can show you what that looks like. So hopefully you can see. So this is the flow that was generated, the sign up or in flow specifically. And then the welcome screen here, this can be fully customizable, right? If say you wanted to add something like, you wanted to add something like Google and Microsoft login, you could easily, put all these in a container. You could put this here. You could put sign in and passkeys with, something like this. And then you can just add those as a very easy authentication method. So some of you, I'm sure some of you are probably already familiar with flows, but basically this allows you to drag and drop any screens that you want to build, any actions, any conditional statements, and customize exactly how your auth works here. And so, to show you how easy it is to say drag in Google, all you'd have to do is drag in the button, which I already did, and then add in a sign up or an OAuth action. So new users or existing users can sign in with OAuth, which is like the standard that all these social login providers will use. And then we can just go to this is new user condition here. If it's a new user, ask for additional information. Again, you can customize all this. Not super important for today's demo. What is important though is the passkey authentication method. So this sign in with passkeys is really nice because you can just drop in, a passkey button here if you don't already have it, and then use the sign up or in passkeys web authent action here. So this is actually going to, if it's a new user, create a new user and actually assign a passkey to them. If it's existing user, you simply just log in. And so you have one action to kind of do both the sign up or in actions. And then is email verified? You might be wondering why we actually check this. And the key reason is that if I'm a new user, say this is a flow deployed in a production level environment, if I'm a new user and I want to sign in and I'm not Kevin, but I want to use kevin@descope.com as my email, because passkeys need a unique identifier to associate the passkey with the user that's logging in. I could theoretically create a passkey for kevin@descope.com, even though I'm not Kevin. And so this email verified here, if I were to attempt that, so if I were to attempt to actually create a passkey called kevin@descope.com, sign in with passkeys, if it created a passkey for me, and I can show you how easy this is, it would actually require that I verify my email. And so this basically just is the one-time proof that I am who I say I am. And once that's already taken care of, we know that this device is that person, and we don't have to continue doing that. But this is essentially how easy it is to add passkeys. And so I just wanted to show you guys, what the flow was. You can see conditional statements here are very easy to add. You can, design any kind of screens you want and use any various connectors here as well. And so let's actually go back to the console that I have. This is my own personal console. And so if I zoom in here, you can see this is what the login screen looks like for me. Very basic login screen, nothing fancy. I have this biometric button here, which is basically like my sign in with Passkeys button. And then you can see I have the sign up or in Passkeys action here. So same as the one that you just saw that was created from the wizard. The only difference I've made to this flow is that I've changed magic link to OTP email, and I've removed all the is new user checks or anything like that because it's not really relevant to this webinar. And so what I want to touch on though is this enable sign in passkey with passkey autofill. So this feature, what it allows you to do is it allows you to tap on, from a user experience standpoint, tap on the email field and actually see all of the passkeys that are specific to that domain that you're trying to sign in with, and click on it, tap your fingerprint and automatically sign in. So it creates a really seamless user experience that I'm going to demo in the actual app. But this is something that, again, with something like Cognito, this is absolutely not possible with the hosted UI. And so it's really easy. If there's an easy way you can integrate Descope with Cognito with OIDC, you can have a functionality like this in your app where your users don't need to worry about passwords, can simply tap on their email field, tap their fingerprint, and boom, they're in their app. And so as far as the flow is concerned, there's only one other thing I want to touch on, and that's these custom claims action here. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with the idea of custom claims, these are keys and value pairs that are passed in through the JSON web token that is returned to Cognito once Descope has authenticated your user. So what this means is that this information is what Cognito is going to ingest and use to update attributes on the user that they have. And so if I already exist in a Cognito user pool as kevin@descope.com, but I want to maybe collect additional information about the user, I want to verify their email with Descope in the flow, obviously I need to tell Cognito that, hey, I actually have verified this email in the flow and that you should update the user in Cognito so that they're always in sync and that you effectively have the same information across providers. And so this allows you to do that. This is the custom claims field right here. And so you can see I don't have too much. I just have email verified as true. The reason I have that as true is because, The reason I have that as true is because if you look in the flow, no matter where I sign in, either Passkeys or OTP email, I'm always verifying the email. And so I know for a fact that the email, in order for it to have ended, would be true. And then also email itself, I'm passing back as the user's email here. And so this is what Cognito will use to identify that that's the user who's signing in. Okay, great. So one more thing I want to show you is in this console before we actually get into Cognito is the IDP applications. So if you want to configure, Descope to connect with another IDP, so something like Cognito, we offer in every single instance of Descope, no matter what tier you're on, we offer the OIDC default application. And this OIDC default application gives you an issuer URL that you actually put into Cognito, which I'll show you in a bit. And this will allow you to set up the connection basically between Cognito and Descope. And so we're going to use this. The flow that you actually use to the flow that you actually want to use to actually sign in your users, that can be changed by this flow ID parameter here. And then auth.descope.io is our hosted web page that runs your flow. And so right here, auth.descope.io, we own this domain. This right here is the project ID of your Descope project. And then the query parameter flow equals test shows that I want to run this specific flow that I was just showing you guys. And so You can actually clone this yourself as a public template. You can host this yourself in your own domain, or you can just rely on ours. It doesn't really matter. But this is just showing you guys how you don't need to, because we have this, you don't actually need to embed anything in your own application to run our flows. So under IDP apps, you can see here, this is where you would, obviously decide if you were hosting it yourself, you'd put wherever you're hosting the flow yourself. And then this issuer is what's going to be important when we actually configure Descope incognito. And so this is just a walkthrough of our IDP apps. And if you have a higher level of service with Descope, a higher tiered plan, you can add as many apps as you want. We support OIDC and SAML as well. All right. So let's go into Cognito real quick. So this is a Cognito user pool. Hopefully, especially for those of you who are already using Cognito, I'm sure you're very familiar with this. This is a generic Cognito user pool that I've spun up with the Amplify command line interface. That's why it has this beautiful name right here. And the sign-in experience tab actually shows you where you can add federated identity providers. And this, along with the Lambda trigger here, are really the only two things that you need to add to your user pool. So everything else is pretty much the same as you otherwise would have. The only difference really is this federated identity provider, which you can add using these kind of various things. We have a full blog about how to actually set this all up, which we'll also link to. So you can see here, we show you exactly what you have to put in. So I'm not going to walk through all the specifics of how you actually set this up. I'll just show you what the configuration looks like. So here I already have Descope configured, and you can see the issuer URL here is just api.descope.com/myprojectid. So my project ID here is the same as this issuer URL here. And it basically is going to get all of the necessary endpoints that you need, set it all up for you. And then here is where you would actually map which attributes you want. So the email and email verified OpenID Connect attributes you see here, that was from the custom claims. And so whatever attributes, whatever information you want to pass back from Descope to Cognito, you would configure here. And then all you would need besides that is your client ID, which is your project ID, and then a client secret, which is just an access key. And this access key just allows Cognito to have access to Descope, allows Cognito to trust Descope in the OIDC standard. So once we have this federated IDP set up, the next thing we want to do is I want to actually show you how the sample app works, what is needed from you as a developer to actually work with custom providers like the one I just configured here. And so here I have a next sample app. Now this next sample app can also be found in this repo, which is also public. And this is using, I recently updated this sample app to use the Amplify SDK version 6, which is very, very new. It just came out last month. If you're familiar with Next.js development and Amplify, this is not using with SSR context or anything like that. This is using all of the new functions that have come out with, including that have been released, including sign in with redirect and this JSON right here. So basically in this application, which is the app that you're seeing, it's running on localhost, but this is the app that is in that repo that I just showed you. The only thing that I really added to this app is this button right here, which is this button here, and it's sign in with Descope. And what this does is when you click it, it calls sign in with redirect using the custom provider that we already configured called Descope. And so you can see I just imported it from AWS Amplify Auth. And when I call this, it's actually going to use this identity provider instead of using the traditional, email password like AWS Cognito already offers. And you can see here in the actual network, when I click this, what's going to happen is it's going to actually redirect me to the auth.descope.io test flow that I configured under IDP apps, which is this flow hosting URL here. And so let me just show you guys real quick. When I actually clicked on that button, it requested from Cognito the authorize endpoint and passed in all of this various information. This is all the OIDC stuff. This includes my client ID, which I've already configured and everything, which comes from here. And then when I actually sign in, and let me sign in totally new. I sign in as Kevin +4@descope.com, and I say, let's sign in with Passkeys. It's going to actually create a passkey for me on this domain. So when I click continue, tap my fingerprint. Oh, wait, sorry, hold on. I have to, Kevin, let me check my flow real quick. So if the user verified email is true, that should be true. Sorry, give me 1 second. So let me log in again. So to Kevin +5, say, at descope.com. And then I will create a passkey. Yes. Okay. So it should, because my email is, I'm a totally new user. My email hasn't been verified. It will ask me, it'll prompt me for an OTP, which I can verify right now. And if I sign in, boom, I'm in. So you can see how I actually logged in with Cognito, and I can prove it to you. If I show the application and I show the local storage, you can see all of these Cognito tokens here are actually, these are not Descope tokens. And so I'm actually signed in using the Amplify SDK. This page is currently protected with the with authenticator wrapper. So this is the admin default page. And you can see with authenticator protects, which is imported from the Amplify UI React module. This is protected so that if I wasn't logged in, say I was, opened an incognito window, went here, you could see nothing shows up, and I actually have to sign in. Now the benefit of this is, as you can probably guess, is that everything is still Cognito. This is my actual new user in my Cognito user pool. This is the new username, which you can see if you go to my pool here. This is the same username that was just created. You can see that the email was verified. How did it know that? It knew that because I passed in the email verified claim as a custom claim in the flow action. And then you can also see that the name is the same. This is the actual, this is mapped to the Descope sub claim, which is the internal user ID of that specific user, which is this. And so, as far as customization, all of this is fully customizable. But this is just a demo or an example of how this works. And then if I actually sign out and I log out, now if I actually log in again, because I enabled Passkeys with autofill, I have this passkey already associated with auth.descope.io with that domain. And if I click that and I tap this, I can log in as the same user by simply tapping my finger on the Touch ID scanner. And so what I've done is I've added very, very sophisticated and also seamless authentication to a existing Cognito user pool. Now, what you might be wondering though is how does this work if I already have a user that exists in my user pool? So say I'm already been using Cognito for a while and I already have, Kevin at descope.com as a user. And let me create that user just to show you guys. So I have Kevin at descope.com as a user. I will mark that email as verified. This user, say, had already been there for a while. And as you can see, this is a Cognito generated user because it doesn't have the Descope it doesn't have the Descope underscore in front of the username because it wasn't created from the federated IDP. but I still want to be able to log in as that user using Descope. How does that work? Well, the way we make that work is using what's called a Lambda trigger, which those of you who are familiar with Cognito, I'm sure you're very familiar with Lambda triggers. And so this, again, the actual kind of development process of this and how you actually implement this is all outlined here in the blog. We talk about how you set up the Lambda trigger, a generic one that you can use and just easily put in your app. That's super simple. And then how you add permissions for it, et cetera, all that stuff. But basically, this Lambda trigger, when you sign up, will identify the user is who they say they are via the email address. So if I sign up as kevin@descope.com, it will recognize that kevin@descope.com is the user that's signing in. It will then look to see, and you can actually see the code here. This is the Lambda trigger that I'm going to be using today. It's actually going to look to see if that user already exists in the user pool. And if it does, then it's going to link those together, effectively merge them so that you only have one user. You don't have duplicate users. And so if you didn't have this Lambda trigger, what would happen is if I logged in as kevin@descope.com, then what I would see is I would see kevin@descope.com as the Cognito user, and then I would create another user as the kind of external provider user, like here. But now, to demo this, let me log out. So now if I log in, sign in with Descope, and then I sign in as kevin@descope.com, just use email. Let's take a look. 810079. I logged in as kevin@descope.com. And you can see it's actually showing the Cognito username, not the Descope underscore username. And if we go to the user pool and we refresh, we can see there's only one user. But if we look at it more closely, you can see that we actually have the name attribute, which is, remember, mapped to the Descope internal user ID, showing up under that same user. And so what this Lambda trigger allows us to do is it allows us to log users in that already exist and merge all the identities together. And so if you combine the ability to design and customize exactly how your flow looks with the hosted UI, which is basically a deployed version of our app, of an app that runs our flow for you, which you can also then copy over as a template and deploy on your own domain, then combine it with Descope as a federated identity provider, and then finally have a pre-sign-up Lambda trigger that merges those identities together, you have a full-fledged platform that has robust authentication with Descope and allows you to leverage all the power of Descope while retaining all of your Cognito user information, backend infrastructure, et cetera. So this is a really, really powerful thing. And again, this all is possible with something like Firebase, with Auth0, with really any other authentication service that supports OIDC, which pretty much everyone does because OIDC and SAML are kind of the two primary standards for federated authentication. And so with all of these things, you have all of the power of Descope right at your disposal. And so to kind of wrap up what we were looking for in the power of flows, if you want to have this experience, which is extremely beneficial for your customer base as well as for security purposes, you can use this federated IDP. So it looks like we do have a little bit of time. So what I want to do is I want to maybe show you guys just a little bit more about flows and what we can potentially build with this. And so with all of the flow capabilities here, including conditions, actions, screens, etc., you can develop a you can develop a very customizable authentication experience with, say, Google, Microsoft, and if you want to actually add custom providers as well. So instead of, if you imagine like with Cognito, if you want to add if you want to add federated social OAuth providers, you have to actually connect each one of them manually in the Cognito user pool. And then you also have to in your own application actually use the Amplify SDK, build out all of those social logins one by one. And so with Descope, you can actually just have one specific flow, design and drag everything in here. You can even use custom providers. So under here, you can design, if you want to log in with, say, Spotify, if you want to log in with id.me or login.gov, those kind of things, you can add them all here. And then you can simply just add a sign up or in OAuth, drag that in there, connect it here, and automatically in your own app, which is this Cognito app here, you can see we have, obviously I didn't format this, but we have all of these as an option to you. And if I click on, say, Google, you can sign in with Google and immediately log in. So really, it's ultimately completely up to you how you want to design your authentication. And once you set this up once, you do not have to change anything in your Cognito user pool in order to get all of that experience. Another thing I will mention is this Lambda trigger, because Cognito is so versatile in what it allows you to do, right? I mean, you can effectively build any Lambda trigger that you want. If you want to do more complicated things, like you want to map specific roles, permissions, you want to like your Cognito user groups, for example, things like that, you can design exactly how that works within this Lambda trigger. And so really the way that you actually integrate Descope and Cognito is in your hands with a little bit of code here. But yeah, so maybe I can take some questions if anyone has any questions. Let's see. Somebody asked, if I'm building a cross-platform application running on web and iOS, would you still recommend Passkeys over something like SMSOTP, or is it best for web browsers? So no, because Passkeys now are supported at an operating system level across, especially like for Apple, they actually store them in your iCloud keychain, and Chrome stores them in Google Cloud, and so it's very easy to work with across multiple different platforms. The WebAuthn standard, like with the 1.0, was really kind of device specific. But now with so much Passkey adoption over the last year or two, there's really not much downside. There's really not any downside to using Passkeys. And so it's very easy to work with across multiple platforms. And then another person asked, is there an easy way or some tool to migrate users over to Descope from Cognito? So yes, there is. We actually have a Cognito migration tool, which is a Python script that you can run very easily if you just follow these instructions here. And this can be modified specifically to your needs. So this is kind of like a template that you can decide. The current implementation of this maps things like Cognito user groups to roles in Descope. And there's many different ways that you can decide how you want your authorization controls and everything to be baked into Descope. But this allows you to kind of have a template to do that. And this is something that is completely accessible to the public. We can also provide a link to this as well. And this would be if you were using Descope as a federated IDP, this is something that you would want to do just once. And then once your users are all synced together, you can just continue using what we just showed in the webinar. When it comes to unifying accounts, what tools or flows are available for that? Say I have an existing email and password user that then signs in with Apple. Are there any ways to handle that if the emails match and if they don't? Yes, exactly. Great question. So this ties into one of the other really great benefits of flows. And so with flows, say you want to say you have a user who has an email or password already, and you want them to be able to sign in with Apple as well or whatever. What you can do is you can actually sign them in using OAuth. So say they want to sign in with, and I don't have an Apple account set up, so I'll use Google as an example. But what's really cool is once I sign up or in with OAuth, if I want to then have them merge with their own personal email, say that email is not tied specifically to their Google account, or in this case would be an Apple account, what you can do is you can actually use this update user action, and you can design a screen that asks them for their specific email, or you can take it from this screen right here. And then what you can do is you can add that specific email as a login ID and merge it with their existing user. So effectively, you can allow your user to sign in with email or OTP or SMS or whatever, and also log in to the same user identity with Descope. And then how Cognito recognizes that user identity, that is dependent on however you want to pass it in with your custom claims. So if that user already exists with an email identifier, but say you want to log them in and identify them with Apple or with SMS or whatever, Descope can handle all this in the flow, design that, and then you can pass in whatever custom claim you want. In that case would be their email, and that's how Cognito would recognize that user. Merrick asks, do passkeys make it difficult for bots to create multiple accounts for the same device? Yes. There's not an easy way to create a passkey, especially with a bot, because it relies on some physical register. So at least in the implementation that we have it, to where it's like either something like biometric, something like a YubiKey, something like that. So definitely it's not something I would worry about. Also with Descope, we have all manner of device fingerprinting as well. And also risk detection with Cloudflare and everything like that already built in. And you can actually, in the flow, you can actually dictate, say if there's a bot detected, from like if Cloudflare detects a bot, you can in your flow automatically kind of just go to a screen that denies them access or something like that, and you can design that specifically like the very beginning of your flow to handle that as well. Hopefully that answers that question. Can you share more details about how this will integrate with AWS API Gateway and AppSync? So great question. So this is something that comes up a ton when we talk about Cognito and Descope federated authentication. So really, again, this is what I wanted to show here. This is what I was trying to elaborate on. Is when you sign in, you are signing in with your Cognito user. So if you already have API Gateway and AppSync configured for that specific customer, their tokens that are generated in the front end. So here, if you look at this is my next app here. If you look at the tokens here, this is the kevin@descope.com Cognito user that already existed. And so the benefit of it is the way, if you want to hit your AppSync endpoints, if you want to hit your API Gateway endpoints, and you've configured in your AWS IAM specific permissions for specific endpoints for specific users, that all remains the same. There's no changes necessary because you are actually just logging in as if you logged in with the hosted UI. The only benefit, the benefit of it here is that you don't have to be constrained to use Cognito authentication. You can log your users in however you want, design the authentication, but the actual kind of underlying infrastructure is all based in Cognito from the client side. All right. So hopefully that answered that question. Will there be a replay? I just got here. Yeah. So if you just got here and you found this interesting or insightful in any way, we have we're gonna we're recording this meeting and it's gonna be actually posted in our auth town, which we'll have a link to. And so also I believe people who are already RSVP'd to this and who join will receive a recording of it as well. But we will be sure to send that all out. I imagine this will help a lot of people who are maybe a little unfamiliar that they can even do this. And if there's other questions relating to other authentication services not Cognito related, feel free to ask in the auth town community as well. We are very helpful there. Just to confirm, can you use the Amplify SDK natively login? Yes. So this next app that I'm using right now is using the latest version of the Amplify SDK. And there's actually not a single mention of Descope in the entire app, with the exception of this one sign in with redirect, which is using the custom federated identity provider that was configured in the user pool to sign in. That's all you need to do in your app. This app is fully using the Amplify SDK with no custom Descope components built into it. And so this is something that, again, we will have a link to. You can come check this out. And this is also using the latest version of the Amplify SDK, the V6 version. And so I know there's not a ton of information about the V6 Amplify SDK out there. And so hopefully this also helps you just in general, wrap your head around the Amplify V6 SDK, because it's very, very new. And then also there's a whole blog here about how to set this up. And then if you guys are more curious about how to do it with other providers as well, you can visit our docs, go to SSO, OpenID Connect, and you can see there's a lot of different ways you can use Descope with something like Retool, you can use Descope with Firebase. Anything that supports OIDC, we can act as a federated IDP for. And so a lot of great resources here if you're interested. All right. Any more questions? How do you handle Cognito user groups and multi-tenancy with Descope auth? Okay, yeah. So Cognito user groups. It really depends on your implementation. So Cognito is very versatile. It's more versatile than a lot of other authentication services in the sense that everything is relatively complicated to work with, but you have a lot of flexibility. And so because you have these Lambda triggers, you can actually really design exactly how your user groups interact or work with Descope. So we've seen in a lot of cases, the user groups that are defined in Cognito are treated in Descope as like roles. So users, just like Incognito, users in Cognito usually are assigned to specific groups. We would that the concept of that can be abstracted in a Descope setting to mean like roles. And then we've seen like in a B2B setting with a lot of different customers who have like 50 or 100 customers they're selling their product to, like as a SaaS company, they'll have 50 to 100 user pools. And those user pools in Descope can be thought of as like tenants. So the tenants here in a B2B setting represent like a customer. And so however you want to migrate your users originally and how you want them to stay in sync can be dictated by how you change the migration tool, which is here. And this is kind of a template for you to jump off of, and also how you want to edit your Lambda trigger. And so, we've done a lot of work on this. So if you're really interested in doing this and you have a lot of questions specifically about your own implementation, again, feel free to ask on Authtown. We've worked on a lot of Lambda triggers, so there's probably a good amount that we can help you with in designing that. But it depends on the implementation really. For most people, these Lambda triggers are relatively straightforward and easy. It's really just mapping the users together so they don't have duplicate users. That's all they really need. But yeah. Okay. Looks like I answered all the questions. So, it looks like, yeah, so it looks like we're almost at time. Again, if you have any more questions, feel free to definitely reach out to me or anyone else at the team. And we will all hopefully see you again for the next installment of the Power of Descope Flows. Thank you and have a nice day.